remember that. There was a lot of bills that were vetoed that year, and somebody made a kind of a joke, a bobblehead Camthorn, because he was like constantly vetoing bills. But I held strong with a few of my other conservative colleagues in the legislature. Unfortunately, we went into May, and the longer that we were held hostage, a lot of people just started dropping off the supplies. And my seatmate, this is my first year, she said, I don't know what kind of a Republican Janice is going to be. And when I was the one that held strong, voted no against raising your tax burden, and she voted yes to raise your taxes. And when I went home to report back to my central committee of Bundy County, I told everyone that I was the kind of Republican that follows the Republican platform. But again, here in Idaho, we don't have a tax problem, we have a spending problem. And so my first year also, what I wanted to do, I came over with grand ideas, and I was going to cap the rate of government spending to the rate of growth of inflation and plus population, which is what the measure of the economic growth is. And my first year, I couldn't even get it out of the tax committee. And the second year, I got it out of the tax committee, but it was killed on the floor of the House. As you can imagine, those who go over to the legislature and serve on JFAC, what is it they love to do? On JFAC is the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee. What is it they love to do on that committee? They love to spend money. Yes, so it wasn't a very popular idea for some freshmen to go over to Boise and want to put the clamps on the government spending, but I tried. It's what I believe in, and I went home. I was a little discouraged. My husband told me, he said, "Well, why don't you just start making small, incremental changes?" And you do that, and you become successful in making small, incremental changes, and then that can grow into being able to do more things. And it was good advice. I did that. And so anyone who wants to run for the legislature can do that, can go over there, get elected, and just start peeling back laws. There's so many laws on the books that we can just start peeling back laws. And that's what we should do, because over all these decades and decades and decades of government action, we have too many laws on the books. But that's what I did when I went over there to serve in the House of Representatives. And it was true that once after I served for each term that I served, and more of my colleagues were learning to trust me and my vote, then I was able to start doing more things that were bigger bills to make a difference in people's lives. And for those who advocate for reducing taxes, that's a great thing to do. But if we're going to reduce the tax rate, we always have to tackle the spending. And so it's an easy thing to say that I'm going to go in and I'm going to reduce this tax, or I'm going to eliminate that tax. Well, I actually have the experience of cutting the spending. And it was in 2008, during that downturn under Obama, that we had a crash. And I was the chair of the House Health and Welfare Committee. And our committee was tasked with finding savings in the Medicaid budget. Our task was to cut spending in Medicaid. Back then, it was a $20 million of Idaho general fund money that we had to cut in the Medicaid budget. So keep in mind, the Medicaid budget is comprised of, in Idaho, it's about 70% money comes from the feds and 30% comes from the state of Idaho. So a $20 million cut of the state general funds is actually a much bigger cut in overall spending, closer to about $100 million. But the Department of Health and Welfare, what they wanted, their solution was to just go in and remove and eliminate whole programs. And there's a lot of people that that are dependent on some of these Medicaid programs, and we need to take care of our people. And so instead of eliminating whole programs, my approach was to work with Senate committee, the governor's office, the Department of Health and Welfare, and the advocates to go in and do a 1% across the board cut. So that if there's not one budget that can't absorb a 1% cut in their spending. So that's how we accomplished that. But we did it because we had to work collaboratively together. Those are just a few of the things that I worked on. I did also provide an opportunity for midwives in Idaho to operate and practice legally. That was quite an undertaking because the medical community did not want any competition. Childbirth is a natural medical procedure. It's natural, and the medical community in the hospitals, Idaho Hospital Association, Idaho Medical Association, did not want any competition. So it took us 3 years to get that passed through the legislature so that midwives could practice legally. Many of them were being arrested in our rural communities because they were performing a natural thing for women. And so those are some big things that we have worked together to make healthcare more affordable and accessible to people, especially in our rural communities. Let's see, also when I was the chair of the Health and Welfare Committee, that was the year that Obamacare started coming down into our state. And when I was the chair of the committee that year, we successfully prevented the implementation of Obamacare in our state. And the way that we did that was I actually printed out the Obamacare law and gave it to every member of my committee. It was a binder that was about that thick. And I printed it out on my own expense. I didn't charge it to the taxpayers. And we studied the law, and it's because we studied the law and the onerous implications onto our lives is what helped us prevent from implementing that in Idaho. Also voted against the implementation of Common Core in our state. And voted against the corrupt crony contract, the Idaho Education Network, ended up costing all of us over $40 million, and I voted against that as well. But I served my time, and I did what I felt like was my job, to represent the people of my district. And as I said, I went back to the private sector. It was when President Trump decided to run for president that I started getting interested in running for office again, and I decided to run for the executive branch of government. And it was Trump's message that resonated with me, how in Washington, D.C., the voice of the people had been lost back in Washington, D.C., and only special interests were making progress. But that was happening here in Idaho too. And so President Trump's announcement inspired me to get back involved in the process and run for lieutenant governor. And then I ran a hard campaign. There were 5 of us in that campaign, and because we had the right message and the right ground game and had networking all across the state, we were successful. And I'm honored to be your lieutenant governor. It's been a great opportunity for me to serve. And really, my job as your lieutenant governor, I'm very limited to what I can do. My job as the lieutenant governor, according to our Constitution, is to preside over the Senate while the legislature is in session, and to serve as the acting governor when the governor is out of state. He doesn't like to let me know too often when he's leaving the state these days. But we tried, my first year as lieutenant governor, we worked fairly well together. He tasked me with he did an executive order. My job was to help find efficiencies in government, and we worked fairly well together that first year. We were making some progress in government efficiencies. But then last year, when COVID hit, it was like immediately there was such a difference in how our current governor, the decisions that he made were so opposite to the basic principles that I believe in as a conservative and one who believes in our Constitution. No government entity has any business deciding that a person or a business is essential and someone else is not essential, and those that are not essential should be shut down. As your lieutenant governor, the 2 days before our governor made that decision and shut the whole state down, called me up on the phone and was actually joking about how the mayor of Boise had just shut down Boise, and he said, well, all the people are going to do is just go from Boise and go have dinner in Garden City. And he made no mention of the decision he was about to make 2 days later. And so I get a phone call on his way to Gowan Field, where he had a National Guard standing behind him, and he declared martial law in Idaho, declaring an extreme emergency, and shut businesses down, took away our right to worship freely, and ordered healthy people to stay home. So that's what, I don't know what happened to our governor from Tuesday to Thursday, but that healthy order that he issued was quite extensive. Somebody was talking to him and convinced him to make that decision instead of working together with other constitutional officers and with legislative leadership to, how are we going to deal with this? But even back then, it was, this virus that was spreading was not anywhere, there were a few cases, and it just was completely unnecessary what our governor did, and it was a smack across the face to Idahoans, hardworking Idahoans. And so I was very opposed to the decisions of our governor, and those were the things that prompted me to decide to put my name in the hat to run for governor, because we have seen such an assault on our freedoms and our liberties. Here we are, 18 months later, and back then when we were being asked as citizens to just stay home for 2 weeks, if we would just stay home for 2 weeks and help bend this curve, and then our lives would get back to normal. And look at where we are now. We've had businesses shut down. So many people have they've lost their jobs, they've lost their livelihoods. We have rates of suicide that are skyrocketing. We have young people that are still being forced to be masked up in the schools. Why? Why is this happening in Idaho? Still, over 19 months later. And now the vaccination mandates, where no person should be forced to receive any type of medical procedure. And thousands of people are losing their lives. The efforts that I made over the past year to try to work with the governor, try to change the course, just constantly being pushed aside, just like all of the people of Idaho, where thousands and thousands of people have shown up at the Capitol steps. When they had their special session last year, finally, after many of us calling on legislative leadership and the governor to bring the legislature back into session. Again, very unconstitutional what happened last year, where the governor spent $8 billion on his own. It's in our Constitution that job is reserved to the legislative body. Finally, the lawmakers came back in August for a special session, and I had a lot of people that came into my office, and they wanted to know how they could, there were people that had never set foot in our Capitol, and hundreds of people were coming out. They were all very upset. And I don't blame them. And I was so proud of so many of you for showing up and testifying in front of the committee. And it's true that the governor and his crony special interests wanted a special liability bill for the hospitals that had kept other people from coming into the hospital and being treated, and many people sadly lost their lives because they were shutting down services for anybody and not allowing people into the hospitals. I'm proud of the people of Idaho for stepping forward last year and continuing to step forward. It's because of your voice. You're making a difference. And so because you showed up and testified in the committees, we had a clean liability bill that said nobody is responsible. And it's true. It's nobody's fault, the virus and the disease that we have experienced here in Idaho and in our country. It's nobody's fault. Nobody should be held liable for it. The lawmakers one of the cries of the people then were to constrict the governor's powers because he has grossly violated our Constitution and done things that are beyond the scope of the executive branch of government. And because the way our Constitution is worded, they interpreted it that they could not address anything else in that special session but for the issue of liability and the election of the governor. Speaking of the election, our governor, along with our Secretary of State, changed the law, and that's also unconstitutional because our legislature is the body that makes election law, and it's up to the legislature to determine the law. But they changed the law, made all of our elections be done by mail-in ballot. And for those of you who supported President Trump last year in the election, and I have been a strong supporter of our president since day one. I was on the Trump Idaho team, served as a delegate. We all saw what happened last year in the election. And when our governor and our attorney general failed to support President Trump, all of the irregularities that we saw in the 2020 election, they failed to submit an amicus brief with the state of Texas. And so the lieutenant governor, along with 40 other state lawmakers, we successfully filed an amicus brief in support of our president in last year's election. But the story doesn't end there on election integrity. We need to make sure that our elections are protected and that you as a voter knows that your vote is being counted. And so I do support a 50-state forensic audit of our election process. Some people say that there's no fraud, and I go, well, we know there is. It may not be widespread, but Secretary of State's office has confessed to me a few cases. One of them is in felony investigation right now. But we're not looking at recounting ballots. What we're looking at is the whole process, the whole election process. And we're talking about a forensic audit where we ensure that laws are kept in place and that the ballots are legitimate, not fraudulent ballots. When you need to cut me off, Tony. Okay, I'll wrap it up. So there's a ballot that if we invest as a state, there's a ballot. The Arizona Senate is conducted in a forensic audit. There's companies out there that can print these ballots that have 20 different personal identifying information in the ballot, and you just shine a black light on it if it doesn't have all of those markers in there. It's tossed out. That's what we're talking about when we talk about election integrity. And those ballots cost a little bit more, but I would say that your vote is worth the little extra investment. We want to keep fighting for our republic. The legislature finally is coming back on November 15th, 16th, 17th. hope that I will see many of your faces there next month, because we do have an opportunity for our voices to be heard once again, and the cries of the thousands of people across the state who have your voices who have been ignored by our governor and our legislative leadership. I hope to see you all out back at the Capitol in those days, because it's once again, it's our opportunity. And I just want to encourage you and thank you for your effort to continue to fight the fight. We are blessed to live in America. This is the greatest nation on earth. It is divinely inspired that our rights are, we are all men created equal with inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And our Constitution enshrines and protects those lives. But our republic and our form of government is at risk by those who want to tear us down. But I have complete hope for the people of Idaho. I have hope for the people of America to continue to stand strong. We just need to claim our heritage and thank the Lord every single day for being blessed to have this great form of government. So thank you to all of you for being here today. God bless you and God bless America.